I'm Rut, the creator and host of The Practical Woodsman. That's right, my super duper genius that brought this all into existence. I'm going to tell you about some people and channels that I personally like and the reasons I like them. I'm going to talk about some of the absurd things you see in survival videos. And if we have time, we'll follow everything up with a campfire story. It's been a while since I've given you one. But first, we have to do the musical introduction, so let's do that. I'll be right here when it ends. Let's talk about the people I do like on the internet, the channels I like, for example, on YouTube, Rumble, those sorts of things, and the reasons why I like them. I'll tell you, I'm pretty hard to please when it comes to these topics of like outdoors, bushcraft, survival, woodsman type stuff. I'm pretty critical. I'm always judging it through the lens of, is that practical? Is the stuff this person is showing off and talking about, is it practical? You know, that's the reason why I come up with The Practical Woodsman. I was looking around at the internet, I was seeing these channels and seeing what these people were talking about and showing off and doing. And I kept asking myself, is that practical? In real life, is this thing they're showing off practical from what I know the true nature of the woods to be, and being on foot and being outdoors and stuff? And 9 times out of the 10, the answer was no. So then I finally said, well, why am I even wasting my time watching this stuff? If it's not practical, why am I watching it? Well, just because it looks good sometimes, right? If you think about it, a lot of times the reason why people are watching a thing is because it simply looks good. But maybe you should get in the habit yourself of asking, is it practical though? So I see that they built this really elaborate fort shelter out in the woods. They cut down a bunch of trees to do it, and it took them 3 weeks to do it. It looks great. Now what's its practical use in real life? And so then you got to ask yourself, well, then why am I even watching this? What is it teaching me? Or what good is it doing me in any real life application? So that's why I come up with The Practical Woodsman. I said, I see a lot of this really fancy showy off stuff that looks great, but I can't find very much, if anything at all, that's practical about any of this stuff. Knowing how to build a fort that takes 3 weeks, requires all that expenditure of energy and calories and stuff, does me no good whatsoever if I'm truly in a survival situation where I'm trying to get back to civilization and I'm trying to conserve calories and energy. I'm trying to do the least amount possible for whatever need I have. So, if I crawl up underneath a rock, well, then that's probably a better solution for shelter, isn't it, than 3 weeks spent building some fortress out in the backcountry. So when I give you these names of people that I like to watch, that's the filter I've found them with. Which one of these people are being practical about these things? Number 1, the channel Waypoint Survival. I like the guy who does it. He's down to earth. The things he shows off are practical most of the time. There's some exceptions, but even in the exceptions, you can find things about what he's doing that you can get practical ideas out of. It's real life stuff. He had an uncle or something, I think it was an uncle, who was a hobo here in the United States. That means that he rode the rails looking for work. Hobos live by a code. They had to learn a lot of skills that are practical for a survival situation, traveling on foot situation, and being out in the wilderness type of situation, because you're not wanting to pack 900 pounds of stuff. You got to go kind of light on your feet. And so hobos do that very well, have historically done that very well. How to dress for all kinds of weather, and how to have different articles of clothing that can serve multiple purposes and things of this nature. Waypoint Survival. He's got a real nice personality too. You can tell that the guy's comfortable with himself, and you can tell that he really enjoys doing his channel and doing his show. And so I have a lot of admiration for him. I don't know the guy. I'm sure he don't know me either. But I do admire his channel. I admire the things that he shows off, and he does a lot of historic stuff too. That's another thing. He's not just showing like modern day stuff. He shows a lot of stuff from like the turn of the century, 1800s. He will mimic, every once in a while he'll do like an episode or a series of episodes on his show where he's mimicking life like the frontiersman. So traveling on foot, using the same types of tools and things that the frontiersmen would use who come up through West Virginia, through Kentucky, southeastern Ohio, Simon Kenton type historical figures, living in the woods, hunting, traveling, staying warm in all sorts of weather, hunkering down, sheltering, those sorts of things. And, so he'll use like a shelter that is made out of heavy cotton canvas, or he'll use haversacks and stuff like that are made out of the materials of the time. And just a really fascinating channel. Now, of course, everybody knows, I think, about Townsends. I've talked about Townsends in the past. I do like Townsends. That channel is very popular. I don't think I've ever brought up that channel, Townsends, and not had somebody know what I was talking about. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. Of course, that's all about like settlers and frontiersmen and that type of life too, what they had to cook with. Just a lot of really interesting things. I mean, the production quality on Townsends is so high. He's got to have a whole team of people helping him out. I don't know how he does it. Of course, the Practical Woodsman, this show is all one-man band. So, just getting a show out every week takes a lot of work. And it's very modestly edited and everything like that. The production value on my show is not super duper great, but I try to keep it real and work with what I've got. Townsend's, on the other hand, it looks like a professional production, and I would love to meet that guy and just say, what kind of equipment are you using? How are you getting these effects and things of that nature, so that maybe I could spruce up my own show a little bit, but that's neither here nor there. The third person or personality or channel that I'm pretty fond of is Hobo Shoestring. Hobo Shoestring, I think his real name was Mark Nichols. He just recently died. They found him deceased, drowned in a lake. But I really enjoyed his channel. It broke my heart when I found out about that. He was just such a down-to-earth character, had a lot of humility. You could tell that he was not putting on airs or anything like that when he recorded his thing. Very low production value. What I mean is, it's just him and his phone. And a lot of the time it was just him walking down railroad tracks talking. But there was just something about the guy. I think he was so genuine and so authentic and just so real that I couldn't look away. Of course, he's riding the rails all the time, having these adventures and everything, and you're kind of in awe that the guy is living a life that a lot of us sort of dream about, but can't actually do. It's just not in we've got responsibilities, we've got other obligations, and it's just not something we can do. And here he had made a life doing that. So Hobo Shoestring, his videos are still up, of course, and I'll keep telling people about him. From what I understand, now this is just from what I understand, I tried to do some research on what happened to him. He was a vet. He was a military vet, and I don't know if that contributed to some of the issues that he was dealing with, but he was always dealing with some health issues. I don't know this for sure. This is just from what I understand, but it seems that he was dealing with some mental issues lately, and he had been in the hospital that early that morning and had come out of the hospital, had checked himself out of the hospital, went home, and he had a lake behind his house, and then went missing. They found all of his stuff there at his apartment. He was missing for days, and finally they found him floating in that lake back behind his house. So, I don't know what happened, but it's a sad turn of events anyway. Hobo Shoestring. You learn a lot of things. I'll tell you, the hobos have a lot to teach people about self-sufficiency, being out in the elements, traveling on foot, getting by, making things work for you, keeping things as simple as possible. Hobo Shoestring, for example, was never sleeping under these big elaborate shelters while he's out traveling from coast to coast and even up into Canada and down south. He was not living in these elaborate shelters. Most of the time, believe it or not, that I've seen of his videos, he wasn't even putting up a shelter. He was just sleeping out in the open. He'd scrounge around and find like a whole piece of cardboard or something to lay on. That was how he did it. Now, most of the time, depending on the season, when I'm outdoors, if there's no indication of rain or snow, I also will do that. I will just sleep out in the open. That's maybe 30-40% of the time where I don't even pitch a shelter. I would say Hobo Shoestring was figuring out ways to sleep outdoors 95% of the time without pitching any type of shelter. And then when he did pitch a shelter, it wasn't anything elaborate. I tell you this, he wasn't stomping down into the woods and building a Taj Mahal out of tree saplings into a big old elaborate fort. He wasn't doing that. So a lot to learn from the hobos, and especially this Hobo Shoestring, who just had personality that I think a lot of people were drawn to. They liked that down-to-earth lack of artificiality. Another YouTuber that I really enjoyed was Nagualero. He's also deceased. And let me spell his name for you. Nagualero. The very first episode of the Practical Woodsman I dedicated to Nagualero. He would go onto these islands into woods around this lake. So I'm sure he was going into known areas that he was familiar with, that he wasn't too far removed from civilization when he would do these things. But he would do a lot of crafts around his campfire. A lot of things with his knife and axe. You know, as far as everything that he did being super practical, not in most cases, not in most survival or true wilderness environments. Nevertheless, I did learn some things from the guy. For example, I really admired and studied and I still tried to emulate his cinematography, the way he would set up his camera, letting the natural surroundings speak for themselves and tell their own story. He did very little talking, if any talking at all, in most of his videos. So he wouldn't sit down to work on a project around the campfire and then sit there and look at the camera and tell you what he's building and why he's doing it and the tools he's using and everything. He wouldn't do that. He would just work in total silence and just have the camera on him while he was doing it. And I've tried to imitate that too. I like that. It lets a viewer kind of feel like they're right there with you, rather than you breaking the fourth wall, you know, and talking to the person, telling them exactly what you're thinking, what you're doing before you've even done it. So I like that kind of quiet nature about his show. Even these things that he would do around camp, I found a lot of value in seeing the projects that he would work on. Like, you know, it gave me completely new ideas for the way you could use a hatchet, or what you can do with a chunk of wood out in the woods if you really wanted to. Nagualero. Nagualero. I think the guy passed away, 2 or 3 years ago at this point. Man, that broke my heart. That was really surprising to me because I looked forward to every one of his videos. Far North Bushcraft is another guy that I really admire. The guy who ran that channel, his name was Lonnie, and his wife often served as the camera person while he was doing these videos. They live in Alaska. Lonnie has such great, practical, real, useful information to share about the wilderness that really comes in handy for all sorts of things. I don't think he's ever had a single episode where I thought, come on now, what's the point of all this? No, every single video that Lonnie did on his Far North Bushcraft channel was valuable. It was practical. It reflected truly the true nature of what it's like to be out in the wilderness. I do need to tell you that he's no longer creating new content. About a year and a half ago or so, I noticed that he wasn't putting up anything new. And so eventually I went and I did a search online to see if I could find any information about that. And I found a post or something that Lonnie had written on a message board. And everybody was asking him, hey, anybody know if Lonnie's doing all right out there? And he replied to it. He said, thanks for your concern. The wife and I are doing great. I don't have what he wrote here in front of me, but I'm just kind of trying to paraphrase. Basically what he said was that he and his wife just kind of wanted to focus on the woods, being out enjoying the woods on its own merit, rather than always having to be thinking of what subject to talk about with each new episode, or where to put the camera, worrying about battery life, and all this technical stuff that can really rob you of being in the moment. I can identify with that. I just come back from a trip into the backcountry. But I'll tell you, instead of just hiking along and just kind of soaking it all in, it does kind of turn into, well, I got to put the camera down. I got to set the camera up. I've got to capture this. I've got to capture that. It's like you can't enjoy anything without working. It's just all work, and it's work enough trying to get in 10 miles a day with, 30 pounds on your back. But when you're having to stop every 5 minutes, set up the tripod, let the camera roll for a little bit, because you're thinking, man, I don't want to get out of the woods and not have this on camera. It really changes kind of the nature of the thing. I think the buddy that I went with, his name's Jeff, I think he was getting kind of sick of it too. Every time he'd turn around, I'd have the camera on, and it's fine for me. I've been doing this for so long, these sorts of things on camera for so long, that I don't even really think about the camera. I feel like I can be pretty natural when I'm talking to you or recording myself. But, the average person who's not used to being on camera all the time, you can imagine like crawling out of bed in the morning, your hair all, looking like a water fountain. Maybe you don't really want people to see that. You don't know how the person recording that's going to get home and edit that. Edit it in your favor or not. So I could understand his frustration if that's what he was feeling. The point of what I'm telling you here is just that once you throw recording and sharing an experience with other people for, later when you get out of the woods, it does change the very nature of what it's like to be in the woods, because your mind is not completely available for simply being absorbed in your surroundings in the moment. You've got other things on your mind too. Set the camera up, get this shot, get that shot. Did I let that record long enough? Was there noise in the background? Something as simple as setting up a camera for like this really beautiful scenery, like a creek or just, the expanse of a mountain or something, and you're trying to record that, but you just finished hiking 5 miles nonstop, and so you're standing there like this. That's something you got to think about, things like that too. Because later, when you want to edit that into a video to show people, well, that in the background of that beautiful creek or that beautiful mountain scene, it's going to rob the thing entirely of its intended effect. You want people to focus on the creek or the mountain or the sunset. You don't want them to focus on you breathing like the big bad wolf there in the background. That's just another peek behind the curtain of what goes in to all of the considerations that a person has to take into account when they're out in the woods recording a thing. So I can understand why Lonnie and his wife are kind of tired of doing that. So it seems like his days of putting up videos on YouTube are done, so we'll call him retired. But, all of his videos still have great value. They're still there for you to watch. Far North Bushcraft. So these are all people who did, or who I believe are still doing a good job of capturing the true nature of things in the woods. I don't like artificiality. And all of the most popular channels and names and faces on these topics, well, I can't say all of them because I don't know all of them. Believe it or not, I don't sit here and search for other people's channels on these subjects. One of the reasons I don't do that is I don't want it to influence me. Like, I don't want to see how somebody else is doing a thing or the things they're talking about, and even subconsciously be influenced by their manner of doing it. So if I don't search out and watch other people's channels on these subjects, well, then what you're getting is just purely my way of doing it without the influence of what I'm seeing around me. So that's one of the reasons. But the other reason is that when I stumble across people doing these sorts of things and talking about these sorts of things, it's just absurd. Most of them are just absurd. And I did years ago, I'm talking maybe 10 years ago, I used to eat up those channels, eat up those people's videos. Not anymore though. What they try to pass off as practical or real, I don't get any enjoyment out of their content. People heating up canned foods or preparing elaborate pizzas and stuff like that in the quote-unquote woods. They're actually just in trees. The packaging, still on their food. They got like a whole grocery bag of items out there. And then they prepare them for the video. And what's the point of any of it? There is no point to any of it, except that it looks interesting to see somebody eating a pizza out in the woods. People doing that could have just ordered the pizza and had it delivered right down to the end of their driveway. They could have walked away from the camera 5 minutes, picked up that pizza and brought it right back, and then just eaten the delivered pizza in front of the camera for you in the quote-unquote woods. But they don't want to do that because then that ruins the illusion that they're actually roughing it. Cooking with cast iron, sleeping on elaborate beds, on elevated beds built out of saplings that took 2 or 3 hours to build, but you're only a 5-minute walk from your car. What does any of that nonsense have to do with the true nature of what you or I would be dealing with in a real situation on foot in real backcountry? It doesn't capture the true nature of anything. It's all fake, and therefore it's all pointless and useless for anything in real life. You see, when I'm preparing a pack for emergencies or for real foot travel through real wilderness, you think about even preparing a go bag or a bug out bag for just like to keep in your car. You have to understand the true nature of what that's going to be like to really be away from your house, away from all your stuff, and you've got what you have in the bag to get you through. Well, these people who are walking 5 minutes from their house into a bunch of trees, what they're eating, the tools that they're using, the bags that they're carrying, are not in any way a true reflection of what the nature of that's going to be like for you, who cannot just simply walk 5 minutes and be back home, or be at your car, or any of these things. Or imagine in a society collapses, you're going to just go to the Piggly Wiggly and get yourself the ingredients to make yourself a pizza? No, you're not going to do that. You have to have a clear and truthful understanding of the real nature of what it's going to be like in any situation you're trying to prepare for. And these people's stupid burritos and grilled cheese sandwiches around a campfire and an elevated tree sapling bed are no use for that whatsoever. They're no use for anything whatsoever, except that they just look interesting. Kind of related to that topic, I don't want to give too many details away, because I don't want you to know who I'm talking about. Somebody not too long ago had this video that they made and were selling about survival in the woods, survival in the wilderness. They recruited several guys to take out into the woods and have them go through this course of things that they thought that they needed to do in order to become really good survival people. And I'll never forget this. It was 100 degrees the days that they were shooting this. It was 100 degrees and 80% humidity. And they kept pushing this guy, big heavyweight guy, pushing him until he collapsed. He almost had a heat stroke. And then they really, celebrated that, because that was an opportunity for them to show you what to do now that the guy is almost having a heat stroke. And at the same time, to kind of show off we didn't have a heat stroke, but you see this guy had a heat stroke, and that's a real danger here out in the woods. Well, how about a story instead about how you don't exert yourself like that in the first place? How about a show about the stupidity of people who would push you that hard in the first place when it's 100 degrees outside and 80% humidity? How about that show? I never saw the whole thing. I just saw the previews for the video. But I'm thinking the whole time, why are they even doing that? I remember they had this big bag, and it's a browse bag, and they're stuffing it full of leaves and all this stuff. And they're making these guys do this. You got to do this if you're going to pass this advanced course or something. I don't remember what they were calling the course. And I'm seeing this, and I'm thinking, why are they doing that at all? Why not just sleep on the ground? Why exert yourself like that at all when it's 100 degrees outside and 80% humidity? I wouldn't. That seems a lot smarter to me than pushing myself into heat stroke and then having the tools to get myself out of heat stroke. Isn't the best thing just not to do anything that will create that situation in the first place where you're now experiencing heat stroke? It seems pretty obvious to me. You see how ridiculous that is? The ridiculousness of pushing a guy to exert himself to the point of heat stroke and then selling it as a story of skilled survival. Well, where was the skills that told you don't push the guy that hard? Or this task that we're having him do isn't even necessary. He doesn't have to do that at all. Who needs this big, enormous browse bed to sleep on when it's 100 degrees outside? It's ridiculous. And those are the sorts of things I'm telling you that I see out there that I just shake my head and I go, what is the point of any of this? I'll tell you that the story I just told you about pushing the guy in those conditions and then yeah, you see this? He got himself into trouble, didn't he? Well, now we've got to rescue him. After they're the ones who told him to do the task and pushed him to do it in 100 degree weather. That makes as much sense to me. I saw a video the other day of this restaurant. Somebody is trying to fill up a ketchup jar, one of those squeeze ketchups. So you got the ketchup container and it's got a nozzle at the end of it. So you can just turn it upside down, squeeze ketchup onto your French fries or whatever. Somebody there was showing another person working there how to refill that ketchup container. And what they did was they unscrewed the nozzle top, turned it upside down, and then put the nozzle down into the bottle and said, look, now you just pour the ketchup in there. Well, it didn't save any time or energy or anything. This is absurd. All the person had to do was just take the top completely off. Now pour the ketchup directly into the bottle. But there's another guy standing behind him watching this, and you can just see the look on his face like, clearly I'm the only person here that has any brains whatsoever, because that is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. That's how I feel about these guys who almost had heat stroke. Going to somebody to learn advanced survival skills, those people pushing you to near heat stroke and then acting like any of it makes sense. See, now we can show you how to bring your temperature down and all those things. Boy, so stupid. How about this one? How about guys showing you videos of them hiking through the woods with their packs, like they're showing off a pack, how well a pack rides, how useful a pack is. And so they load it up with everything, right? They load it up with everything, and now they're going to hike into the woods, and then they're going to shoot a video showing you the contents of their pack so that you can see all the really interesting things they're carrying in their pack, and this really well thought out survival pack. Rucksacks, backpacks, they do this. So they get out there, all right, got this new pack I want to show off. And they turn the camera to the ground, and they get down the ground with their pack, and they start pulling items out of it. Okay, I've got this rain poncho, I can turn that into a shelter. I've got this cordage, and then they're showing you, this is my water bottle, and it's this type of water bottle, and they're fire starters and all these things. I want you to pay attention to that from now on. And I want you to ask yourself, where is their food? Oh, yeah, that's something to think about, isn't it? Food. You pay attention to that. They absolutely pack these packs to the brim with all this stuff, with all this stuff, all this gear, and there's no food. They pack no food. Why is that a problem? The problem is that unless you've got like 3 days worth of food in there, whatever they're showing you is complete and utter fiction and fantasy. None of that stuff is going to do you any good if you didn't leave room for any food. Because you might get in one day into the woods, say you get 10, 15 miles into the woods. That's a lot of energy expenditure. Most of us aren't walking 10, 15 miles every day with 20, 30 pounds on our back. Not without refueling, especially. See, if you go to like the local track, or you go to the gym and you run that far on a treadmill, what's the first thing you do when you come off the treadmill? You drink a shake, or you go home and you have supper. And in every one of these videos I see, they want to show off all the really cool gear and the really cool backpack they have that is packed to I'm talking to the brim. You can't fit another thing in there. No food. No food. Another thing that means is that when you want to pack a pack like that and you have to take food, what does that mean? It means half of that gear that they're showing off, that they're pulling out of their backpack, you won't even be able to get it in there because it'll have to make room for your food. So you pay attention to that when these guys go off, let me show you my gear. Let me show you the gear, my pack out gear. Okay, I don't see any room left over for any food whatsoever. Any food. A candy bar does not count. You have to have at least like 3 days worth of food in there, which means you can't carry that mattress, or you can't carry that water bottle, or you can't carry that hatchet, or whatever, Whatever you have to carry, something has to come out in order for it to make room, for there to be room for you to carry that thing you have to carry. So think about that. And, that's another thing. Think about that when you're packing your own pack at home. Never pack your pack and say, wow, that's perfect, unless you've got 3 days worth of food in there, or how much ever amount of food that you're going to need for whatever thing you're going to be doing. You have to get the food in there to understand now what has to come out or what can I leave in. But you can't pack a pack without the food and say, oh, this is perfect, because 3 days worth of food takes up quite a bit of space and adds quite a bit of weight if you want to be serious about it. Let's talk about underground shelters. Those look cool, don't they? When you see people building underground shelters, they look awesome. You see these guys, man, they spend all kinds of effort digging those holes, don't they? And then building roofs over top of them and elaborate stairs down in there, and they got stoves on the inside. I had a cousin who built one of those when I was a kid. Oh, he did the same thing. put in so much time and energy and everything. It looked great. It looked great until the first rain. Yeah, they don't tell you that, do they? What do you think happens to water when it rains a lot? It seeps down into the ground. Now, if you've got a pit dug, a hole dug down in the ground, and your walls are just dirt, and your floor's dirt, and you've just got like a wood roof built over top of the thing, no matter how fancy that looks, what they're not telling you is that water is getting in there all the time. I mean, it will fill up like a well. That's how much water you will get in any type of underground thing like that you build. But no, you're seeing these videos all the time, aren't you? Of these guys building these forts underground. Now, in the wintertime, it's probably not a big deal. Not a lot of rain. Not a lot of snow melting. But what do you think happens when spring comes around? Completely unusable. Those childish underground forts become unusable because it rains, and the rain's got to go somewhere. They don't show you that, do they? Why do you figure they don't show you that? Because they don't want you to know how impractical and pointless it ultimately is. My thinking has always been, now I've seen some of these forts that they build in the woods, and I've thought that, it looks great. It looks like a lot of fun working on that and everything. But, I built a fence just a few years ago with treated lumber. How long do you think that fence is going to last with treated lumber? In the weather, the sun blaring down on it and all that stuff. Well, it's got a finite lifespan, even with wood that is treated. Now, let's say that you spend the same amount of effort and time building a thing, but you're just building it out of these little sapling trees that you cut down in the forest. Now, how much life do you think those have? How long will it be that material being out in the open, out in the forest, getting bombarded by rain and all sorts of things before it rots away? So my thinking has always been, if I'm going to put that kind of time and energy into a building project in the woods, why would I not do it right and use proper materials? For example, build it up off the ground, build a proper floor, waterproof it properly. Why wouldn't I do that? Don't I want to get the most returns for my effort? And if you're just cutting down saplings and building a little elevated bed or something in the woods, or a little elaborate fort with complete with a fence and everything, that's an awful lot of work for something that's going to have a really short lifespan. You're talking maybe 2, 3 years, 4 years, but even 5 years goes by real quick, and all your work just rots away. If I'm going to build something, I want it to be around for 20 years. I want it to be around for 30 years. Otherwise, I'm not putting that time and energy into it. I hope I gave you some things to think about, and that I didn't just come across as like a negative Nancy, but that there was a constructive purpose to it all. Let's close with a campfire story. Back when I was a kid, there was this pond that was not far from us in the woods, and we called it Nola's Pond because a relative of ours named Nola lived in a trailer not far from that pond. Man, we spent all kinds of time down at Nola's Pond when I was a kid. It was just like the center of activity for everything. First of all, I did a lot of fishing. Almost every day, I would burst off of the school bus, grab my fishing pole, and I'd run down to Nola's Pond and just fish all night long until after dark. Learned a lot about the natural world down there at Nola's Pond. Well, one winter, we had some friends visit us from the city, some city friends, and we were taking them around, took them down Nola's Pond, me and my brother did. And we got down there and they said, "Have you ever swam in this pond?" I said, "Yeah, sure, we swim in it every summer." Well, you know how boys are. As soon as we told them that, the two brothers, there was 3 brothers there, they started daring each other to hop into the pond. Now I'm telling you, this was like in January. It was so cold outside, but we were really layered up with coats and everything, and there was snow on the ground. It was, I'm going to guess there was like 3 feet of snow on the ground. And the temperatures had just really dropped recently in that time period, because the water was not yet frozen over. So the pond itself was not frozen over. but there was snow everywhere, and it was frigid cold. And we're standing on this dock on the pond that goes out over the pond, And these brothers start daring each other. I dare you to jump in. I dare you to jump in. So we had decided that if we were going to do this, we had to strip off all of our clothes and get completely naked, because we couldn't go back up to the house with wet clothes. We'd all get in trouble. They especially would get in trouble, being city kids. So we had decided, well, what we'll do is we'll strip off all of our clothes and then jump in. And that's what we did. We all stripped off our clothes. Standing on that dock, all 5 of us, buck naked. So it was their 3 brothers, and then me and my brother. And we're standing there on the dock, freezing our hoochie coochies off. And all the way up till the last minute, I thought, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to have to do this, because nobody's going to have the guts to actually jump into this water. We're all kind of like trying to talk ourselves into this, when the oldest brother of the people that were visiting us, he just does it. Just runs and jumps off the dock, spoosh, into the water, comes swimming back, and his brother looked at me. I'll never forget this. His brother looked at me and he said, "Matt did it." Matt was the name of the older brother. "Matt did it? Well, I'm doing it." And he spun around and poof, off he goes. Boosh, into the water. And these guys, I'll tell you what, it was like a Scooby-Doo cartoon, where they're running so fast that their arms and legs are just like blurred circles, and they're kind of like running on top of the water. That's what they look like trying to get back to the shore. Well, at that point, now I'm like, man, I can't let these city boys show me up, so I'm going to do it. And I took a run, and I jumped off the dock. And I'll tell you the experience. The reason I'm telling the story is because of the effect that happened as soon as I jumped off the dock. As soon as I jumped off the dock, it was like, time's moving at like a regular rate, the same speed it always moves. And as soon as I jumped off that dock, I'm in the air, and time just slowed down. Like I've never experienced anything like it before. It was like time came to a halt, and I'm going through the air in like slow motion. If you see these movies of like The Flash, the way everything happens, he's moving so fast that everything slows down. That was kind of the effect in my brain. And I remember, now I'm in free fall. So I've just jumped off this dock. I'm in total free fall, falling down toward the water. But everything is moving super slow. And I remember my toe, the tip of my toe, hitting the water as I'm in free fall. And then time went even slower as that water moved up my foot, up my leg, up my torso. And I'm telling you what, I am like grabbing the air, trying anything possible to keep my body from going the rest of the way in that water. And of course, there's no stopping it at this point. And I bloosh completely under the water. It was the most shocking thing I think my system has ever been put through. As soon as I come up out of the water, I was doing that same thing. Like, your arms, what do they call that? When your arms and legs are moving so fast, they're like, what do they call that? Windmilling, they call that. So my arms and legs are windmilling like Scooby-Doo running across the water, and oh my goodness, it was painful. So you hear these stories of these guys, what do they call them, the Polar Bear Club. They do this every year where they do this. I know what that's like, and I've already earned my stripes, ladies and gentlemen. You're not going to catch me doing that again. But that's my story. It's a true story. I'm telling you, it was like time slowed to a dead stop. Think about how fast I'm falling when I jumped off that dock. In real life, it was just jump, splash. But for me, I felt the tip of my toe touch the water, and it seemed like an eternity as that surface of the water moved up my legs, up my torso, over my head. It was like nothing else. So there's my story about jumping in an oldest pond in the wintertime. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me for this episode of The Practical Woodsman.